Good morning. Well, it's fantastic to be here. Here is an interesting place, right? Because we've had to move our here. And actually, that's really what I'm going to be talking about this morning, about how we are managing to adapt to change. Some are faring better than others. We're all facing these challenges. And I think what's really interesting at the moment is how businesses are having to adapt very, very quickly to what's happened because we simply don't have any choice. So I'm going to share my screen with you. I've got a presentation for you this morning that is all about weathering uncertainty and how we can adapt to change. And it's about becoming a change maker business. So I'm going to start with a question. So what's the most important characteristic do you believe that companies need for the future? And that characteristic is the ability to change. Now, as you know already, I'm a speaker, I'm a sharer, I'm a social innovator. And my focus for over the last 10 years has been on this whole notion of change and change making. And I help companies become change maker businesses and in turn change lives. So the coronavirus crisis means that businesses are having to change in order to survive. Now, over the last 5 years, we've seen this transition with businesses. We've seen that it's no longer the case that businesses can only be creating commercial value, that we need to be creating both social value and environmental value. And never has that been more clear and more prominent as now during this pandemic. So what exactly is a change maker business? Well, a change maker company is a sustainable business that creates value for people and planet. So I've spent the last 4 years working on a book called Generation Share that was published last year. And this book is about change makers. And I traveled around the world to meet and speak to and interview over 200 change makers. And I'm going to share a few of these case studies with you today. So this is the Lena Library, which is a fashion library in Amsterdam, where people borrow clothes. Instead of borrowing books, they borrow clothes. You have a subscription, it's a subscription model, and you're able to borrow as many clothes from that particular collection as you like. This is Dan van der Poel. He set up a company called Peerby. He had the misfortune of his apartment burnt to the ground, and he came up with this idea of Peerby. Now, Dan's premise is that he sees cities as warehouses full of stuff, and he's created a really successful goods sharing model. Similarly, Akshay Bhatia in India has created Mutterfly. He recognized that for this goods sharing model to work in India, there were a number of stigmas and challenges that he had to overcome. That India is a service-based society and that people expect the goods to be delivered and collected. And it's really taken away a lot of the stigma around second-hand goods in India. This is Ruth and Amy Anslow, sisters, who've set up a rebel supermarket called Hisby, which stands for How It Should Be. And what's extraordinary about this efficient model is that everybody is very fairly paid through the process. And when you purchase something in the store, you get a pie chart which tells you exactly what percentage of the price that you've paid for that particular product, where that goes. Very much a change maker company. And finally, this is the Trust Cafe. And this is a cafe where people pay as they feel. People come along to this cafe and they're able to pay what they believe is the price either they can afford or that they should afford. And ultimately, the business, in fact, is more successful than some of the other cafes in that particular neighborhood. And these are all change maker companies. Obviously, these are small companies. I'm not talking at this stage about necessarily the larger companies. I will come on to that because this affects everybody. But you're seeing these innovative approaches. So what do change makers have in common? First of all, change makers are sharers. They really consider how are they going to share. They put this idea of creating what I call a collaborative advantage. Then, of course, we've got this idea of change makers being brave because they really are about reinventing the rules, but also adaptability. So change makers do need to be adaptable because if you think about it, your company can only change lives if you're willing to change and adapt. This is a word we don't always associate with business, but love. Because change makers all put love at the heart of what they do, and that's love and care for people and planet. That's both in terms of their employees, in terms of their products and their services, and really considering the impact of what they do. And then, of course, change makers are very positive. So this is about finding solutions, but it's also about showcasing success. So the next characteristic and the final one is that change makers are future conscious. because this is very much about seeing the bigger picture. It's about being systemic and really considering the long-term impact of what you're doing. There's no doubt that to weather uncertainty in a world with challenges like COVID-19 and climate change, companies need to become change makers. So the question is, of course, how do you become a change maker company? But it does begin with these three key questions. So what does your business currently do that is needed in a time of crisis? And the next question is, using your existing capabilities, what could your company do that is needed in a time of crisis? And then the final question is, what do you need in order to make this happen? Another question, this is your bonus question, what aspects of your core business or indeed your life could you do online? And you'd be amazed. Now, I put together a Changemaker checklist. First of all, how are you sharing or providing access to a shared resource? How are you sharing opportunities through your supply chain? Who can you partner with to create social value? And how are you building your collaborative advantage? Because this is something that you're going to need. We're moving from an era of competitive advantage to an era of collaborative advantage. Next, we're looking at this whole question of bravery. How are you being brave? How are you reinventing those rules? And how are you being social leaders in your industry? And we talked about adaptability. So how are you changing as a brand? How are you changing lives? How are you leading change? And how could you change your products and services to create that value for people and planet? Next, we're looking at love. So how are you embedding love for people and planet in your products and services? How is love part of your company culture? How are you leading change with love? In terms of being positive, how are you showcasing positive change? How is positivity part of your company culture? And how are you leading change with positivity? And finally, looking to the future, how are you looking at the bigger picture? What are you doing to create that future value? And how are your products and services sustainable? Are they circular, for example? How are you changing lives for the future? And how could your brand or your company help build a better world? So consider what's happening right now. What is it that you're doing? How could you be making that contribution to the future? Because these are all the key ingredients to ensuring that your business survives and weathers this uncertainty. So your future depends on becoming a change maker company. How well can you share, be brave, adaptable, positive, show love for people and planet, and consider the future impact of everything that you do? Change making is the future. The question is, will you be part of it? Final thing is just to say, my book, Generation Share, which is supporting slum girls to have an education in India. And each book is made from 100% waste materials and plants a tree. And people have more time on their hands right now. It's very uplifting. It's been called the Big Yellow Book of Hope. It's got some extraordinary examples, as I mentioned, of change makers, and that can be purchased anywhere online and directly from the publishers from Policy Press as well. And thanks for sharing.